It started as a routine cleaning to scoop some mud off the coast of Indonesia, but turned into a discovery of remnants of a lost, submerged, Ice Age landmass. Archaeologists found more than 6,000 fossil fragments, and among them, 140,000-year-old Homo erectus remains. This find made scientists rethink how early humans lived, moved, and interacted in Southeast Asia. For years, they thought that Homo erectus on Java Island lived in isolation, separated from the rest of the world. But these dredged fossils blew that story apart. It turns out Java wasn't an island at all back then, but part of a landmass called Sundaland. So, Southeast Asia stretched out like someone had drained the ocean, connecting Indonesia, Malaysia, Borneo, Thailand, and Vietnam into one gigantic landscape. Today's islands of Java, Sumatra, Borneo, and Bali were connected by river systems that probably looked like the Amazon, by forests where giant animals roamed, and by coastal plains that would later sink beneath the ocean when temperatures went up. And Homo erectus were not stuck. They were thriving in what honestly sounds like prehistoric bliss. Yep, it was nothing like we normally imagine Ice Age, a sort of frozen wasteland. Sea levels dropped more than 400 feet because so much water froze into glaciers. When all that water got locked up in ice, whole sections of the ocean floor popped out of the water like stepping stones. Suddenly, early humans didn't need boats. They could literally walk from what's now mainland Southeast Asia all the way to places that are islands today. They could do it while exploring and chasing herds across open land. It was sort of like a giant prehistoric highway system. That giant highway matters because it completely rewrites how early humans moved around. Instead of being trapped, Homo erectus had a whole continent to roam. They followed rivers, crossed valleys, and adapted to different environments the same way you learn shortcuts to the office or find new routes to your favorite coffee shop. And because everything was connected, animals wandered freely too. Tigers, elephants, supersized cows, and turtles the size of small cars. People followed these big animals. This among the fossils pulled from the Madura Strait, such as cut-marked turtle shells and cracked open bovid bones. When you see precise cut marks on bone, it means someone was deliberately carving meat off the bone with tools they made themselves. And cracked bones mean they were taking out marrow, which was like prehistoric energy gel, rich, fatty, and perfect when you need calories to survive. That's a level of planning and skill scientists didn't expect from Homo erectus. It pushes Homo erectus closer to species like early Homo sapiens and Denisovans when it comes to behavior. It means they weren't just surviving on scraps, they were actively pursuing animals, processing, and maybe even sharing food the same way later humans did. So if you imagine them as slow, hunched cavemen, forget that. These people were sharp. The techniques they used to process food look eerily similar to those used by other hominins. Not just Homo erectus, we're talking Homo floresiensis, Denisovans, and early Homo sapiens. That opens the door to the possibility that these groups didn't just exist side by side. They might have interacted. Maybe they traded ideas and copied techniques. Or maybe they even interbred or shared territories. All this makes Southeast Asia look not like a series of isolated islands, but like a buzzing human ecosystem, a place where different human species crossed paths. And here's the heartbreaking part. Everything we know about this place, everything humans built, lost, and discovered there, is all underwater now. When the Ice Age ended, glaciers melted like forgotten ice cream cones on a hot sidewalk. Sea levels rose. Slowly, then quickly, rivers flooded, coastlines vanished, entire human landscapes disappeared beneath the waves. Sundaland drowned over thousands of years, and the people who lived there either adapted or moved to higher ground. Archaeologists now try to interpret what these people did, how they lived, and how many human species walked that land. Every time they pull together bone or artifact from the seabed, we get one step closer to rewriting everything we thought we knew about early human migration. And the new discovery could mean that Southeast Asia may have been just as important to human evolution as Africa, the Middle East, or Europe. Looks like Sundaland wasn't a side quest, but a real mixing zone, a place where humanity experimented, adapted, learned, and evolved. Unexpected finds like this one in Indonesia keep popping up around the world and surprising scientists. Farmers in China were hoping to scoop up bat droppings for natural fertilizers inside a narrow limestone cave. But instead, they spotted pieces of fossilized bone that looked suspiciously like parts of a human skull. This skull turned out to be ridiculously old, around 300,000 years old. Scientists eventually named the fossil Maba 1. The discovery happened way back in 1958, but ever since then, nobody could agree on which ancient human species this skull belonged to. During the late Middle Pleistocene, the world was basically a crowded highway of different ancient human species wandering around. Or just maybe, Maba 1 came from a species we've never met before. The big issue was that researchers only found part of the skull, no jaw, no other bones. So it was like trying to solve a giant puzzle with half the pieces missing. For ages, scientists guessed it might be Neanderthal. But now they've used micro-CT scanning, which is like an X-ray superpower that lets you peek inside fossils without breaking them. That's when they noticed weird tube-like structures connecting parts of the brain case, something Neanderthals basically never had. The inside shape of the skull looked way more like Homo erectus, a much older human species. But even that wasn't a perfect match. The skull's size and shape were closer to modern humans and Neanderthals, and it showed traits Homo erectus usually didn't have. For example, it had a shorter forehead area and a thickened bregma, the meeting point between two skull bones. Maba 1 also had a strange dent on the forehead, almost like a bruise frozen in time. Whatever caused it, maybe a fall, maybe anemia, it happened while the person was alive. But there was no sign of infection, so that individual probably healed and kept living after whatever hit them. So Maba 1 doesn't match any known species perfectly, but it shares features with several and has a similar mystery fossil vibe as others found across Africa. In 1976, a famous paleontologist and her team found another human-like skull in Tanzania. That skull had features that looked surprisingly similar to Homo sapiens, even though it was unbelievably old. Scientists think it may be one of the earliest examples of our species ever discovered. That means this skull could help solve one of science's biggest questions. When exactly did Homo sapiens first show up? The sediment layer where that skull was found goes all the way back to the Middle Pleistocene. That's way earlier than what old textbooks used to claim about when modern humans appeared. And then there's the skull that turned up in Zambia's Broken Hill ore mine. Miners literally stumbled on it, plus a few other bones, completely by accident. Scientists started calling it Rhodesian Man, and at first, everyone thought it might be the big missing link between Homo erectus and Homo sapiens. But with newer research tools and better dating methods, they discovered it's around 299,000 years old and probably belonged to someone from the species Homo heidelbergensis. Every new fossil acts like a missing puzzle piece on the giant chaotic story of human evolution. Each one helps scientists connect species that once seemed unrelated, redraw family trees, and rewrite chapters of our past we didn't even know were wrong. When you think of super pricey colors, gold, silver, and purple probably come to mind. But back in Pompeii, blue was the real showstopper. Known as Egyptian blue and later renamed Pompeian blue, this color was total luxury, glamorously coating walls in ancient Egypt as far back as 2500 BCE. And in Pompeii, the demand was so high that blue could cost more than even the ridiculously expensive purple. Finding a blue artifact from Pompeii is not easy, let alone a whole room. But in May 2024, archaeologists finally uncovered a completely blue room filled with murals, featuring female figures and symbols of the four seasons.
Oh wow, this is the blue room?
This gem was actually discovered ages ago during the Bourbon era, but it took until recently to finish a full excavation. The Blue Room isn't huge, about 86 square feet, but don't forget that vibrant blue is rare for Pompeian frescoes, usually saved for the fanciest spots. Experts think this room may have been a sanctuary for rituals or sacred stuff. Among the finds were bronze jugs, lamps, and 15 hefty amphorae. Amphorae were the Tupperware of ancient Rome, perfect for transporting liquids like olive oil, beverages, or garum, an infamous fermented fish sauce that Romans couldn't get enough of. Their tapered design meant they had to either stand on a rack or be buried in the ground, but that shape made shipping them really efficient. Also, the archaeologists found there were building materials for renovations and a ridiculous number of empty oyster shells. While you might think this room hosted some fancy shindigs with oysters and gallons of beverages in those amphoras, in reality, the shells weren't even leftovers from a posh dinner party. Instead, experts believe they were ground up to mix with plaster and mortar. The next find was unearthed around 2 decades ago, but the scientists only realized it in 2024. They had dug up the oldest cheese ever, clocking in at a whopping 3,600 years. The previous record holder was only 3,200 years old, found in an Egyptian tomb of some big shot named Thutmose. When they discovered that younger cheese, they found broken jars with this solid, whitish mass inside. It took some serious sleuthing to confirm it was cheese and not some ancient science experiment gone wrong. But let's go back to this 3,600-year-old cheese. It wasn't just sitting around like any old lump. It was actually a fashion statement. It was found in the tomb with the mummy of a young woman from northwestern China. She had the cheese hanging around her neck like some sort of dairy bling. Now let's talk taste. When experts were asked if they'd try the cheese, their answer was a swift no way. So basically, nobody's diving in to find out if it's pungent or not. But thanks to some fancy tech, they can analyze flavors. But even if they had dared to try, I bet it's nothing to write home about since it's as hard as rock now. Scientists figured out this cheese was likely kefir cheese, made from fermenting milk with kefir grains and had both goat and cow milk in it. Funny enough, the ladies whose tomb it was found in belonged to the Shiauha people, who were probably lactose intolerant. But don't fret. Despite their limited plant options, they could still enjoy cheese since this kefir delicacy had surprisingly low lactose levels. Remember when everything felt brighter? The grass greener, people friendlier, and trees looking regal? Okay, maybe I'm exaggerating about the grass and the folks, but not the trees. In 2024, some ancient plant fossils from New Brunswick, Canada, are making waves. They uncovered Sanfordiaculus densifolia, a tree over 350 million years old. It sported a trunk, flaunting over 250 massive leaves, some up to 5 feet long. Instead of a classic crown, it had a bottle brush appearance on a slim trunk just 6.3 inches wide. It's like this tree went to the gym and skipped leg day for leaf gains. Typically, ancient trees are depicted as basic trunks, but this one is a real standout. It's somewhat similar to today's ferns and palms, though palms came later. These fossils are well preserved, buried in an ancient fault lake after an earthquake. While many might just think, cool tree, scientists are excited. This discovery helps them piece together our planet's evolution over millions of years. I get it, those blue rooms, ancient cheese, and trees aren't exactly inspiring much hope for the future. But I've got something that might just change the game. In 2024, scientists discovered a new theoretically habitable planet called Gliese 12b. It's a bit smaller than Earth, but bigger than Venus, and is orbiting a mellow red dwarf star about 40 light-years away in the Pisces constellation. This star is just 27% the size of our Sun, and 60% as hot, which puts Gliese 12b in the Goldilocks zone, where liquid water could actually exist, even with its speedy 12.8-day orbit. If it's got no atmosphere, the surface temperature is about 107 degrees Fahrenheit, so if you're used to Arizona summers, you'll be just fine. The only problem is that Gliese 12b is 12 parsecs away, and sec here doesn't mean a quick second. With our fastest spacecraft, a trip would take around 225,000 years. To put it in perspective, if we imagine a regular human lifespan of 100 years, which is already slightly exaggerated, it will take about 2,250 generations to get there. Still, it's nice to know we have Gliese 12b on deck in case things go south here on Earth. And even if we never actually get there, studying it with the James Webb Space Telescope might help unravel the mystery of why Earth stayed livable while Venus didn't. Archaeologists in Egypt have made an exciting discovery. They found the upper half of a huge statue of Ramses II. This 12.5-foot limestone piece was uncovered in Hermopolis, now Ashmunain, and it lines up perfectly with the lower part found in 1930. It took almost 100 years to finish the puzzle. The statue shows Ramses seated, wearing a crown and a headdress with a cobra, symbolizing his rule over both Upper and Lower Egypt. The back of the statue is covered in hieroglyphs, listing the king's numerous titles, highlighting his status as one of ancient Egypt's most powerful pharaohs. Combining the upper and lower pieces would create a statue nearly 23 feet tall. You probably know the Statue of Liberty was a French gift, but did you know that the famous Venetian lions were actually made in China and not Italy? Back in 1295, Marco Polo returned to Venice from a place called Cathay, we now know it as China, and shared some wild stories about everything from paper money to coal and even Kublai Khan's swanky palace in Xanadu. While some people back then rolled their eyes at his tales, modern scholars are still raising their eyebrows a bit. Despite the skepticism, Polo is a key figure connecting Europe to ancient China. Now, some recent research suggests Venice and China were already well connected before Polo's trip. A prime example? The Bronze Lion of Venice in St. Mark's Square. Researchers from the University of Padua believe that it actually came from Chinese copper around the lower Yangtze River more than 3,000 years ago, all due to a chemical analysis they ran in 2024. The winged lion became Venice's symbol between 1261 and 1264, probably even before Polo's adventures. Experts point out its resemblance to the Tang Dynasty tomb guardians, which hint it might have had a makeover on its way to Venice. 2024 is not only the year of scientific discoveries, but also the treasure hunt year. A 2-foot-tall bronze statue of the Greek deity Diana, once a fixture on the Titanic's fireplace mantle, was discovered during a recent underwater expedition. Discovering this statue was like finding a needle in a haystack, except the haystack is 2.5 miles deep in the ocean. It's just one of the many art pieces maritime archaeologists have been looking for among the Titanic's wreckage. It was more than just a luxury liner. It was filled with art treasures, from a 1912 Renault to this stunning statue inspired by a piece at the Louvre. One more step in the wrong direction, and the crossbows will release their arrows. If you open the wrong door, you'll end up in a river of mercury. It's almost impossible to get out of this place, but it is even more difficult to get here. No, this is not a location from an adventure movie, but a treasure hunter. This is a real giant tomb filled with traps and streams of toxic mercury. And it's not somewhere deep in the Amazon jungle or an unknown island. This tomb is located in central China, near the city of Xi'an. And you know what the coolest thing is? This tomb was built more than 2,000 years ago, and even now in the 21st century, we still don't know how to get there. But let's start from the beginning. Many of you have probably heard of terracotta statues, thousands of clay sculptures of people. Those statues were first found in 1974, when a group of peasants were digging decks near Xi'an. They found a detailed human-sized figure, and that was 1 out of 1,000. Each figure was made as realistic as possible. Each of them was unique and had its distinctive details. More than 50 years have passed, and scientists are still digging up these sculptures. The number has already exceeded 8,000. But what are they doing there? What is their purpose? Terracotta sculptures are kinda guarding the tomb of Emperor Qin Shi Huang. He was such an influential man in China that he wasn't just buried in a tomb. His servants created a giant coffin complex the size of a small town. So, if thousands of clay guards symbolically protect this place, it's difficult to imagine what's in the center of this ancient, gigantic tomb. But first, let's find out who Qin Shi Huang was, and then move on to the dangerous traps. He was the first son of the ruler of the kingdom of Qin. It was one of the 6 kingdoms that existed on the territory of modern China. In 2059 BCE, when Qin Shi Huang was born, those 6 kingdoms were independent and separated from one another. Moreover, there was a strong conflict between them that lasted for more than 200 years. But Qin Shi Huang turned out to be the man who managed to conquer and unite all these kingdoms. He became more than just a king. He became the first emperor of China. But how did he complete a seemingly impossible task? Natural disasters, clever strategy, tactics, and skills helped him to conquer the 6 kingdoms. Scientists are still arguing about some of the details of how this happened. All that can be said is that Qin Shi Huang was a very wise and intelligent emperor. So it's not surprising that his burial turned out to be so huge. He was buried in the largest and most luxurious funeral complex in the history of China. The area the size of a small city contains many underground caves filled with things an emperor could need in the afterlife. In ancient China, as well as in ancient Egypt, people believed that when an emperor went to the other world, he could take with him those things that were buried with him. Unfortunately, sometimes it could be people, but Qin Shi Huang acted wisely and correctly. He decided to bury clay statues. But the coolest thing is that the architects and builders of this complex made it impregnable. The whole area holds many secrets, historical artifacts, and priceless objects. There's a beautiful place with the emperor's body in the center of this tomb. Imagine how many treasures you can find there, and all of them were meant to remain untouched and unseen by other people. And we probably won't be able to get to them, at least in the near future. Ancient Chinese historian Sima Qian wrote something about the tomb about 100 years after the emperor's burial. He said that this place had dangerous traps inside the tomb that would destroy anyone who dared to enter the tomb. The engineers installed crossbows with loaded arrows and also poured a huge amount of mercury, simulating the movement of rivers. Of course, that was 2,000 years ago, and crossbows probably don't work anymore. But what about mercury? This toxic metal has no expiration date. It's shiny and moves quickly in liquid form. It looks beautiful, but don't touch it. Even a small drop of mercury can cause damage to your body. Inhalation of its vapors or ingestion causes damage to nerves, the liver, kidneys, and many other symptoms. And that's just one drop. Imagine how dangerous rivers of this substance can be. Who knows how much mercury was loaded there by the tomb builders? But even if you dodge all the traps and don't end up in the poisonous river, mercury would still be able to harm you. Its vapors can pass through the cracks in the walls. This means that the entire tomb is probably soaked in this substance. And by the way, this is not just a guess. Scientists have measured the mercury level at the excavation site and found that it's much higher than normal. But why mercury? In ancient China, mercury was considered the elixir of youth, the source of immortality. According to the records, Qin Shi Huang often took pills with this element. Perhaps this was the reason that his life ended at the age of 49. In any case, people can damage ancient structures and artifacts during excavations. For example, archaeologists caused great damage to Tutankhamun's tomb during its exploration. You dig around, but then suddenly the entrance collapses and you destroy vases, scrolls, interior decorations, and other stuff. But even if you do everything carefully, the writing and drawings on the walls can be destroyed by sunlight or oxygen. Places where there has been no fresh air and ultraviolet radiation for thousands of years have their own chemical composition that can be damaged by contact with the outside world. In the 1970s, when archaeologists were excavating terracotta sculptures, the paint pigment fell off the statues, because of contact with the sun and air. Fortunately, the archaeologists quickly adapted and created a technology that allowed them to get the statues out without damaging the paint. It was a long and careful process, but it was worth it, and here's why. According to ancient writings, the emperor created an underground kingdom with a beautiful palace in the center. He decorated the ceiling of this palace with expensive pearls. You know why? To simulate the stars in the night sky. And that's just the ceiling. It's difficult to imagine how the walls, floor, and tomb of the emperor are decorated. Besides, scientists expect to find many other statues that copy the emperor's servants. So, in simple terms, the tomb of Qin Shi Huang is a paradise for archaeologists and historians. But of course, it will take more than one generation before they extract all the treasures. Some experts predict that the excavation of the entire tomb could take centuries. But of course, new archaeological technologies can change everything. For example, non-invasive research methods mean you don't have to enter the tomb. You can see it through a special device. Another idea is the use of muons. Those are subatomic products that appear as a result of the collision of cosmic rays and atoms in the Earth's atmosphere. The point is that these muons can penetrate through solid objects, just like X-rays. Or how about nanotechnologies? Imagine millions of tiny digger robots climbing into a tomb and starting to scan the area. They transmit the data to a computer, and then scientists create a holographic model. It all sounds cool, but to be honest, the charm of archaeology is lost here. It's one thing when you carefully dig up some ancient artifact with your hands, see it with your own eyes, and scrupulously clean it from the ground. And it's completely different when you watch it on a computer screen. But in any case, technologies using muons or some kind of robots ensure people's safety. It's better if a computer falls into a trap than if it happens to an archaeologist. Something exciting and kinda unexpected popped out among the rocks of the Ica Valley in Peru. The bones of a really old whale that lived almost 40 million years ago. At first, no one was really impressed because the bones they found were big and weirdly shaped, so people just thought they were looking at giant boulders. I mean, that's cool too, but things got way better when they realized those were the remains of a very large ancient animal that roamed along the coast of ancient Peru. Plus, it was probably the heaviest creature that ever lived. Sorry, blue whale, I know you worked hard to get to the top. The length of over 100 feet and weight of more than 200 tons brought you the status of the biggest animal on our planet. But it seems you've held the title long enough. Time to hand it over to our next candidate, and that one's really gigantic. This ocean beast was probably shorter than the blue whale, but heavier, with a weight that could be between 93 tons and 370 tons. If it's closer to the higher number, it'll make Paracetus the biggest animal ever known to have lived on Earth. And it seems its weight was the result of having extremely thick, dense bones. You can see such bones today in manatees or some other early whales. Dense bones are a great tool for such marine mammals. This feature makes them heavy and allows them to stay submerged most of the time. But at the same time, if their body was too heavy, they would end up sinking all the time, and they would waste too much energy to move back up to the surface. So, to avoid sinking, marine mammals need to have enough lighter tissues, like muscles and fat, to help them float in the water without using too much energy. Now, scientists didn't have the whole skeleton, which makes it hard to tell how big the animal was. But they used the ratio of the heavy bones to the lighter tissues in other marine mammals to estimate the overall weight of this giant ancient whale. Experts found these fossils about 13 years ago and spent the next decade freeing the whale from the rock. Its anatomy and age showed this whale was a cousin of Basilosaurus, a whale that had a long snout full of sharp teeth, and a sleek body similar to that of an eel. Even if Paracetus wasn't bigger than the blue whale, it was still a giant that ruled the ocean depths. Unlike modern whales, there's a possibility that this ancient fellow was a predator that liked to go after bigger prey. And this also changes how we see the history of whales. Scientists used to think these magnificent creatures became really big about 5 million years ago when they started eating lots of small creatures. But here's the proof that giant whales existed even before that. But it's still unclear how this whale managed to find enough food to sustain its enormous body. Plus, it's still hard to tell what exactly this ancient creature had on its menu. It was pretty large and not such a fast swimmer, so it's possible it searched for food in shallow waters. Then it probably ate crustaceans, clams, or some other small animals hiding in the sand. One theory says it was a scavenger, which basically means it munched on remains of everything that would come its way. It's not so unusual to find marine animals in deserts. Many of these regions used to be covered with water anyway. The Sahara in Africa is a perfect example. About 50 to 100 million years ago, this was not a dry desert, but a shallow saltwater body called the Trans-Saharan Seaway. The land is not wet there anymore, of course, but people who lived in that area knew about it because they used to find old shells across the desert. The sea was about 164 feet deep. That sounds enough for a nice swim. Some would say this area looked like modern Puerto Rico, with lots of sun and shallow water. Mangrove forests were a common thing as well as seafloors covered with mollusks, like snails and clams. The marine sediment that was left behind after the sea had dried up is full of different fossils. And the animal that lived in that ancient underwater world didn't look friendly. Plus, they were much bigger than their relatives from modern times, so a regular-sized human would end up as a snack, not even a whole meal. Normally, when animals live on small islands, they can become much bigger than their relatives from the mainland. This is something we call island gigantism, and it happens because there are more resources or fewer predators on islands. Maybe the same thing happened in the Trans-Saharan Seaway. Even though it wasn't an actual island, the water moved in and out, which created little pockets of water. And specific conditions in these pockets might have helped animals grow bigger. So we're talking about giant sea snakes, catfish, and fish that no longer exist today. One had incredibly strong jaws, and the animal used them to eat hard things and even crush shells. Their teeth showed they were fierce predators other animals had every reason to be afraid of. They went through some changes when it came to diet, similar to some types of piranhas. And the competition to get to the top of the food chain wasn't a joke. Not when there were also such large predators as sharks, crocodiles, and ancient relatives of elephants. Sahara went through different phases. If you could use a time machine and take a peek at Earth's largest hot desert as it was about 6,000 years ago, you wouldn't have to struggle with sand and heat. You'd have a nice walk through a green and pretty lush place. In the past, people who lived in that area didn't leave drawings on cave walls that showed camels, sand dunes, and scorpions. All those things you'd see in today's Sahara. Instead, they drew crocodiles. That's additional evidence that the Sahara used to have a lot of water and plants enough to support these big yet scary animals. Around 3 billion years ago, Earth might have been mostly covered with water. Today, it's about 71% of its surface, but it seems that our planet used to be a giant ocean world with no continents at all, just some scattered islands. Scientists studied special rocks in Western Australia that formed in a place deep under the ocean called a hydrothermal vent system. To explain this better, it's important to mention two common oxygen types, O16 and O18. O18 is heavier because it has extra neutrons. O16 evaporates from water more easily, and as researchers studied an old ocean floor, they found a lot of O18, more than in today's oceans. This way, they realized ancient Earth had less dry land than Earth today. Australia is a good spot to conduct these studies because a long time ago, it also used to be a beautiful place with large animals and lush rainforests. But as time went by, the land became drier and Australia had more deserts formed, such as the Great Victoria Desert. rainforest remained only on the edges of the continent. What happens with deserts across the globe is called desertification. That's when land that used to be good for growing things turns into a desert or something similar. Our planet changes over time, together with its climate. But desertification also happens because of human activities, like mining, farming, and building cities. And when land turns into a desert, it's a problem because it can't support people and animals anymore. Food doesn't grow there. There's not enough clean water, and animals lose their homes. To help with this problem, there's a plan many countries agreed to. They decided to work with farmers to take care of the land, fix damaged areas, and manage water better. All in all, to make our planet a better place for life. Not many civilizations are as mysterious as ancient Egypt, a powerful empire that lasted over 3,000 years. It gave us pyramids that still stand and myths that still inspire. It's one of the most explored places on Earth, yet somehow, we still find exciting stuff. In Abydos, archaeologists just uncovered a 3,600-year-old royal tomb. It's huge! It has golden hieroglyphs of deities covering the entrance, but the pharaoh's name? It's not there. It's missing. Who was this ruler, and what new chapter could this open in Egypt's story? If there's one place in Egypt where the line between life and demise feels thinner, it's Abydos. To the ancient Egyptians, this was sacred ground. They believed it was the burial place of Osiris, the god who literally passed away, had his remains separated, and came back to life to rule the underworld. Because of that, Abydos became Egypt's spiritual gathering place. Pharaohs built amazing temples here, like the Temple of Seti, famous for its King's List, a wall that has the names of 76 pharaohs carved in it. Pilgrims came from across Egypt, leaving offerings and participating in Osiris festivals, where his demise and rebirth were ritually reenacted. It wasn't just symbolic worship, it was Egypt's version of Comic-Con. But instead of cosplaying superheroes, people reenacted gods coming back to life. Obviously, pharaohs competed to be buried as close to Osiris as possible. Abydos became part cemetery, part holy city, part afterlife insurance policy. Fast forward thousands of years, and we still uncover remarkable stuff around Abydos. That's the case with the recently discovered tomb. In early 2025, a joint team of researchers from the US and Egypt decided to dig beneath a rocky rise ominously called Anubis Mountain. You remember Anubis, the jackal-headed deity who guarded cemeteries. The uncovered royal burial was hidden 23 feet below the surface. Sadly, even though it eluded archaeologists for so long, robbers had already taken away with treasures ages ago. They could definitely tell this was a tomb of someone super important. Similar to how you can walk around a mansion with no furniture but still deduce that someone rich must have lived there. The chamber had mud brick vaults rising over 16 feet. That's taller than a female giraffe standing upright. For something built 36 centuries ago, it still felt enormous. However, when you remember that Egyptians were masters of architecture, nothing seems surprising. So no treasures, no golden mask, and sadly, no name. The cartouche that should have spelled the king's identity was unreadable. Egyptian tombs usually bragged about who was inside. In ancient Egypt, a cartouche was basically a big oval name tag for kings wrapped in hieroglyphs. Think of them as VIP passes that worked in both this life and the next. Without it, your soul couldn't check into the afterlife hotel. That's because to the Egyptians, your name, your Ren, wasn't just so your teacher could distinguish you from kids with the same haircut. It was a core part of who you were. As long as your Ren survived, so did you. To have your name forgotten was considered a fate worse than passing away. A soul cannot journey without a name. That's why you'd see cartouches all over the place, on temples, obelisks, jewelry, statues, and tomb walls. It wasn't there just for the marketing. It kept the pharaoh's presence front and center everywhere you looked. Imagine building a massive tomb only for 3,600 years later to walk in and go, who is this guy again? Not cool at all. That's why it's fair to imagine our nameless pharaoh haunting the robbers for all eternity. So yeah, Cartouche was considered very significant. One of the most famous and mind-blowing examples comes from the tomb of Thutmose III. His burial chamber and sarcophagus were literally shaped like a cartouche. In other words, the entire room was a living architectural symbol of his name. Thankfully, in the recently discovered tomb, not everything was erased. Painted in golden hues at the entrance were two familiar guardians, deities Isis and Nephthys. Isis was the magician who stitched Osiris back together and breathed life into him. Nephthys, her sister, was the eternal mourner and protector of the mummy. Together, they promised that whoever rested here would not face the afterlife alone, and it's one additional proof of the importance of the mysterious pharaoh. So, who could this be? To answer that, we need to go down history lane. This tomb dates back to Egypt's messy chapter called the Second Intermediate Period. Instead of one ruler in charge, the country had many rival kingdoms, each with its own little power base, like a real-life Egyptian version of Game of Thrones. And right in the middle of that chaos was Abydos. For a while, it was home to its own line of kings, the so-called Abydos dynasty. Those weren't the pyramid builders everyone knows, and that's why they're so mysterious. They left behind almost nothing. No great monuments, no sprawling cities, just fragments of names on broken blocks. For centuries, many scholars even doubted they existed at all. That sorta changed in 2014, when archaeologists uncovered the tomb of Senebkay, one of those shadowy kings. Now, everything we know about Senebkay points to him having quite a story to tell. His bones revealed 18 deep wounds, the kind you get in battle. He had blows to his skull, back, and hands, and likely lost his life fighting, making him one of the few pharaohs we know who sadly fell in combat. His tomb was modest, with reused artifacts from earlier kings, but it delivered one priceless thing: proof. Until Senebkay, the Abydos dynasty was just a theory. With him, it became real. And that's why the new discovery could be a big deal. The newly uncovered royal tomb at Abydos shares the same layout and style as Senebkay's. It has limestone chambers, mud brick vaults, and protective deities, although it's much bigger. Which again raises the possibility that we're looking at an even earlier, more powerful ruler of Abydos. Whoever he was, he wanted to be remembered alongside the greats. Which is ironic, because it seems that history tried erasing him. Perhaps additional findings alongside his tomb could tell us more. Yes, there's more, and it's actually pretty cool. Not far from Abydos, in the village of Banawit, archaeologists uncovered a Roman-era pottery workshop. Yeah, you heard that right, a pottery factory close to a pharaoh's burial ground. The site had huge clay kilns, storage rooms, and even broken shards called ostraca. They were basically ancient sticky notes, except instead of shopping lists, those had receipts scratched onto them in Greek and Demotic Egyptian. Little records of everyday transactions, the kind of thing you'd never expect to find near a lost dynasty king. Honestly, the potters missed a chance. Forget boring receipts, they should have been selling Osiris's mugs and Anubis figurines to pilgrims and tourists. But that's not all. It seems that centuries later, during the medieval period, the same ground became a cemetery. Archaeologists found mud brick graves with skeletal remains. This could mean that Abydos kept its aura of significance for hundreds of years after the Age of Pharaohs. So why this hill again and again? Is this place really a getaway to the afterlife? It is, after all, the very place where Osiris is said to rest. That belief lingered like a shadow for thousands of years, strong enough to pull in pharaohs and later medieval families. Different rituals, same sacred ground. Although, to be fair, the Romans weren't here for Osiris. They came to make pots. The story of Abydos is not over. The excavations will continue, and who knows what else could be discovered in the future. Today, archaeologists are armed with tools that are basically X-ray glasses for the desert. Every scan could reveal a hidden chamber, or if we're lucky, finally give our nameless pharaoh his wren back to him. In fact, I became strangely invested in finding out who he was. So let's hope for some news soon. It's only a matter of time. Do you have your own theories? Let me know. Warning: if you're a devoted fan of ETs and accept every story about contact with them as fact, you might want to skip this video. What you're about to hear is the hard truth, and yes, it may be disappointing. On the other hand, if the idea of them makes you uneasy, this video might actually put you at ease. And if you don't believe in those little green cuties but constantly find yourself debating people who do, just show them this. First, you need to know that there's no solid evidence that intelligent extraterrestrial life exists. What does exist is strong evidence that all the so-called ET incidents you've heard about during your whole life actually have very reasonable explanations. One of the most famous examples is the Roswell incident. On July 8, 1947, a strange object crashed on a ranch in the state of New Mexico. It was described as a flying disc. First, a local newspaper reported the story. Then, the incident spread across the entire country. People claimed it was the crash of an ET spacecraft. Authorities said the object was a meteorological balloon. People didn't believe them. Rumors exploded. Many theories spread everywhere. Years later, after all the hype slowed down, the truth finally came out. The flying disc was part of a top-secret government project, a high-altitude balloon designed to detect signs of nuclear testing. But even after the truth was revealed, many people refused to accept it. The Roswell incident became a full-blown cultural phenomenon, especially among UFO enthusiasts. Yet, among the thousands of books, articles, and documentaries about Roswell, you won't find a single verified fact proving an ET spacecraft was ever involved there. That same year, another mysterious object was discovered and also caught public attention. No one knows exactly where it landed, but many people connect it to the Roswell incident. At first glance, this metallic fragment seemed extraordinary. Its internal structure looked unlike anything known at the time, which led some to believe it was part of an alien craft. Further analysis showed the object was made from an alloy of magnesium and zinc, with traces of bismuth, lead, and other elements. Of course, the presence of these elements alone doesn't prove the object was made on Earth, since these substances exist throughout the universe. Then, scientists examined the isotopic composition of magnesium and the rest of the materials, and they determined that the alloy was manufactured on Earth. Still, one thing about the sample raised eyebrows: bismuth. Some people speculated that aliens might use bismuth in some kind of propulsion or flight system. However, these ideas were purely speculative. The bismuth found in the samples contained impurities, which clearly showed it was produced using ordinary Earth-based manufacturing methods, not any unknown technology. But that technology would require a pure bismuth alloy. Unfortunately for UFO fans, the analysis showed that the bismuth in the sample contained lead impurities, which is clear evidence that no alien technology was involved. It was created on Earth by people. However, its manufacturing process was unusual because of the specific mix of elements. The object also had damage caused by impact and heat exposure. Most likely, it was a component of another top-secret surveillance balloon. Okay, how about another alien-like incident? This is the famous but though less well-known WOW signal. In 1977, a radio telescope in Ohio detected a strange signal from deep space. It lasted 72 seconds and stood out dramatically from the background cosmic noise. Astronomer Jerry Amon, who discovered it, was so shocked that he wrote "Wow" on the printout. The scientific community briefly suspected that this radio signal might be a message from alien technology, but it was never detected again. Later explanations suggested it may have been radio emissions from a neutron star, amplified by a cold hydrogen cloud. You can also find realistic explanations for other similar cases on the internet. However, Roswell and similar cases happened decades ago. But what about modern stories? You've probably seen videos recorded by pilots showing fast-moving, elusive objects in the sky. Scientists carefully analyzed these videos and found something interesting. The observed behavior contradicted the laws of physics. If an object moved that fast through air or water, friction should produce a visible heat trail or plasma glow. But nothing like that appears in the footage. Does that mean it's alien technology? Probably not. A much simpler explanation is that the cameras used weren't advanced enough to capture what was actually happening. We don't know the distance between the object and the camera. We don't know its real speed. It could be a visual artifact, a sensor glitch, or a lens distortion. If you still believe these recordings show real UFOs, ask yourself this: why, after all these years, do we still have no high-quality footage? Why is it always low resolution, blurry, and often black and white? Millions of unclear images mean nothing compared to a single clear, high-resolution video, and we don't have one. The probability that UFO sightings are optical illusions or sensor errors is far higher than the probability that they represent alien spacecraft. Many people simply want to believe in ETs, so they amplify hype about any news hinting at extraterrestrial technology. A perfect example is Oumuamua, the first known object to enter our solar system from interstellar space. Some people panicked, claiming it was an alien probe. In reality, it was almost certainly an interstellar asteroid-like object. Remember the more recent panic surrounding 3I Atlas? Online rumors claimed it was an artificial object that would approach Earth in November 2025 and change our lives forever. November has passed, the object is now moving farther away. No alien invasion happened. So does that mean the only way to find extraterrestrial life is to wait for random space rocks to pass by? Or hope someone records a UFO in 4K, or 1080 at least? Can we actually do something ourselves? Yes, we can search for technosignatures. Technosignatures are signs of technological activity that intelligent life could do. These are biosignatures like microbes or molecules that suggest simple life. But searching for biosignatures across space is incredibly difficult. Technosignatures are easier. They include radio signals, laser emissions, or atmospheric pollutants such as carbon dioxide or methane. Earth itself emits technosignatures detectable from afar, so why not look for the same on other planets? Where do we start? There are over 6,000 known exoplanets. Any alien technology would be based on the same physics and chemistry as ours, because the laws of physics are universal. Maybe massive solar panels on a distant planet produce excess heat we can detect, or perhaps large-scale industry releases chemicals visible through powerful telescopes. There's a checklist of technosignatures scientists look for. When something matches the list, the real work begins. Researchers must confirm that the signal comes from technology, not a natural process in space. A few years ago, astronomers observed a Tabby's star, about 1,280 light-years away. Then, they noticed that it began to darken as some huge object blocked it. Its unusual dimming led to speculation about alien megastructures. They suggested it could be some giant alien ship that parked near the star. In reality, it was just space dust flying around. That's why every technosignature requires careful verification. However, so far, no confirmed technosignatures have been found. Space is vast, the planets are distant. Maybe we simply can't see each other yet. Even if there is intelligent life, our communication might be impossible with current technology for them and for us. One famous Italian-American physicist, Enrico Fermi, once summed this up with a simple question: where is everybody? No, how is it possible that no one in the whole cosmos has contacted us yet? Perhaps the most uncomfortable answer is the simplest one. Maybe we really are alone. Of course, there's a possibility that the aliens just don't want to get in touch with us, or they're still developing their technologies for interstellar connection. But let's be realistic. Aliens don't exist. Probably. In the near future, humans extract ancient DNA from a long-extinct creature. They patch up the missing pieces with genes from a modern-day animal. Then, in a high-tech lab, they bring the species back to life. Sounds familiar? Well, yes, that's actually the plot of the original Jurassic Park. But the thing is, we're now living in the timeline where researchers are doing exactly that. Although this time, the star of the show isn't a raptor or a T-Rex. Believe it or not, scientists at Colossal Biosciences want to bring back the giant moa. Think of it as an ostrich, only twice as tall and way bulkier. It was a massive flightless bird that went extinct almost 600 years ago. The moa once roamed the forests of New Zealand, towering up to 12 feet tall with its neck stretched. This makes it the tallest bird to ever walk the planet. It weighed almost 500 pounds, but funny enough, that doesn't make it the heaviest bird that ever lived. That crown goes to Madagascar's elephant bird. But still, 500 pounds of bird is not something you want running at you in the woods. The giant moa didn't have wings or a beak built for battle, but it didn't need them. For thousands of years, it lived in peace because it had no natural predators, literally being the top bird. Well, almost. The only thing that could take down a moa was the Haast's eagle, a giant bird of prey with a 10-foot wingspan and claws like steak knives. That was the balance of nature, until people arrived. Around the 13th century, the Maori settled in New Zealand, and as humans do, they adapted quickly. The moa, big and slow as it was, became a crucial and probably delicious food source. Within just a few generations, the moa was gone, and not long after, so was the Haast's eagle. No more moa meant no more meals. It's just how nature and survival work. The Maori were skilled hunters, making a life in a new land. But their arrival marked a turning point in New Zealand's ecosystem, one we're still talking about today. The moa wasn't just big, it played a huge part in keeping forests healthy. Now, 600 years later, scientists want to recreate it using cutting-edge technology and ancient clues. But why go through all this effort to resurrect a bird that's been gone so long? Well, according to Colossal Biosciences, the same company behind those gene-edited direwolf cubs that we talked about before, it's not just about the wow factor. They say moas help shape the landscape itself. In New Zealand, moas helped control vegetation and spread native plant seeds. They kept forests from becoming overgrown and unbalanced. Without them, some plants lost their main seed carriers, and invasive shrubs started to take over areas once kept in check. So, the idea is, if we can't rewind the clock, maybe we can reboot the system. Introduce an animal that fills the same job that can help restore what's missing. Okay, but how do you bring back an extinct species? And is that even possible? Well, sort of. But not in the sci-fi clone a complete dinosaur way like in a movie. The original moa has been gone for centuries, and its DNA is damaged, degraded, and full of holes. So instead of making a perfect copy, researchers are going to remix, so to speak. They'll take whatever usable moa DNA they can find and patch the gaps using genes from its living relative, probably the emu. With a tool called CRISPR, which is like a Photoshop for genomes, they'll stitch it all together, tweak the embryo, and grow it in a lab. If all goes well, the result will be something that looks, walks, and stomps like a moa, but not exactly a genetic twin. It won't be a clone, and it definitely won't be 100% authentic. However, Colossal Biosciences says that's fine. If it behaves like a moa and fills the same job in the ecosystem, that's mission accomplished. So no, we're not recreating the past. Not literally. We're building something new that plays the same role. But here is where it gets interesting. Colossal Biosciences seems to be just getting started. They've got an entire extinction comeback roadmap in place. In addition to the giant moa, the company is also working on reviving the woolly mammoth, the dodo, and the thylacine, also known as the Tasmanian tiger. Each one vanished under different circumstances, but the goal is the same: to create a modern version that can fill the ecological gaps those animals left behind. Woolly mammoths were Ice Age elephants. They were befriending ground sloths and shaking the Arctic ground with each step, knocking down trees and flattening snow. During the Ice Age, this region wasn't the frozen wasteland we know today. It was called the Mammoth Steppe, a dry, windy grassland stretching from Spain to Siberia to Alaska, filled with cold, hardy grasses and scattered shrubs. Mammoths helped keep it that way. However, some scientists think that their disappearance may have turned open ecosystems into soggy, carbon-trapping wetlands. So now, the idea is to mix mammoth DNA with Asian elephants to create a fuzzy, cold-loving hybrid that could help the Arctic stay grassy instead of swampy. Maybe even help slow down climate change by keeping the permafrost frozen a little longer. The dodo bird is probably the most famous extinct animal in history. It lived on the island of Mauritius, where it ate fruit and helped spread seeds across the forest. After European sailors arrived, the number of dodos slowly dwindled. It disappeared in the late 1600s, less than a century after it was first discovered, and some scientists believe that its absence had lasting effects on the island's ecosystem. One example would be the Tambalakoke tree, also known as the dodo tree, which might have depended on the dodo to help its seeds sprout. The theory has been debated, but it's safe to say that the dodo had a part in keeping the island's plant life balanced. Now, Colossal is aiming to reintroduce a bird that's similar to the dodo, hoping it can help those forests regrow as well. And then there's the thylacine, my favorite. It's part wolf, part kangaroo, with tiger-like stripes. Despite these strange features, it was a top predator and helped control prey populations in its habitat. But after being blamed for attacks on livestock, it was hunted to extinction. Researchers believe a new thylacine could rebalance nature where things have gone out of hand. So yeah, the moa might be the headline this time, but it's just one project on a much longer to-do list. However, this is where the big debate begins, because not everyone's on board with this whole bring back a beast plan. While scientists dream of second chances, plenty of people still have big questions. For example, are we actually helping the environment or just poking it with our really expensive science stick? These new animals aren't exact copies. They're mashups. Close enough maybe, but not the originals. Also, ecosystems aren't machines where we can just swap out a part and expect them to work the same. There's also the wildcard factor. A lab-made moa might not act like the ancient one. It could munch the wrong plants or throw off the balance by outcompeting something that wasn't even around the last time it existed. Some experts worry that tossing new species into today's ecosystem could backfire. After all, the world they're coming back to? It's different. And in some cases, their old homes don't even exist anymore. There's also a deeper concern: the message this sends about extinction. If people believe we can just bring things back, will they take conservation any less seriously? Will protecting endangered species feel less urgent if extinction stops being permanent? So while the science behind all this is undeniably impressive, the ethical questions aren't going away. Should we be reviving species, or should we be doing more to protect the ones that are still here? If both options are true, how do we do so successfully? Whether it's mammoths, moas, or dodos, one thing's clear: we're not just studying nature anymore. We have the power to rewrite it. And like Uncle Ben said, with great power comes great responsibility. Let me know what you think. And as always, stay on the bright side.
In the past 30 years, scientists have made an incredible discovery of a new creature living deep beneath the surface of the ocean. And the name of the creature is the harp sponge. Now, if you're wondering why it took so long to come across this animal, then I might have the answer. These creatures typically hang out at a depth of roughly 11,100 feet beneath the ocean's waves. This sponge species was first discovered off the coast of California thanks to a robot that was sturdy enough to explore those crazy depths the ocean has to offer. This is no doubt an area of the planet where even the most benign-looking creatures can be potentially dangerous. But even scientists were surprised to find that this creature was more than just a sponge. Now, this might seem obvious, but the harp sponge got its name because its basic structure, referred to as a vein, is the same shape as a harp. Each vein is made up of a horizontal branch supporting several parallel vertical branches. But don't let the harp sponge's fanciful and amusing appearance or its non-intimidating name fool you. Yeah, the harp sponge is very much a deep-sea hunter. It has a unique ability to capture and envelop small animals using its rhizoids, short, thin fibers. With their help, the harp sponge clings on to the soft muddy bottom and catches tiny creatures that get swept into its branches by deep-sea currents. Uh-oh. Other sponge creatures often feed by pulling bacteria and bits of organic matter from the seawater and filtering them through their bodies. But not our harp sponge. Instead, it snatches its future meal with minuscule barbed hooks that cover each of the harp sponge's branches. Now, harp sponges prefer tiny crustaceans like crabs, crayfish, shrimps, and prawns. Once the harp sponge has one of them in its clutches, it envelops the animal in a thin membrane before slowly beginning to digest it. So, pal, what's eating you? Oh, Harpo? Too bad. Researchers believe that harp sponges use this method of feeding because there aren't enough nutrients that deep down. This makes traditional filter feeding less effective. Research has shown that the creature is still in the process of evolving. Early harp sponges, researchers found, only had 2 veins, but later, scientists discovered other harp sponges that had 6 veins. The harp sponge might have evolved this elaborate candle holder-like structure to increase its surface area. In general, harp sponges typically grow up to a length of 1 foot, but researchers have seen a creature that was 2 feet in length. The harp sponge is not only very unusual, but also beautiful to look at. See those tiny white balls on top of the branches? Now, why don't we look at some other creatures that live below the photic zone of Earth's oceans? The photic zone means the area beneath the ocean's surface that still receives some sunlight. Thanks to this, there are loads of different creatures and organisms living there. Any animal living beyond this layer qualifies as a deep-sea creature. The Tomopterus worm is a segmented worm you can find in the twilight zone of the ocean. This is the area that lies between 650 and 3,300 feet beneath the surface. These creatures are often no more than 1 inch long, but the largest of them can grow up to 1 foot. While swimming around and feeding, these worms do what researchers describe as an amazing smooth dance. That's because the creatures can swim extremely quickly and maneuver at tight angles with ease. Now, I know most people hear the word worm and think of the common earthworm, so it's quite interesting to know there's a deep-sea worm out there that never leaves the water during its entire life. Similarly, most of us try to avoid jellyfish that either rest on the sand or sit on top of the ocean waves. This isn't the case with a chrysota jelly. That's a deep-sea creature too. This beautiful jellyfish is mostly ruby red, bright orange, or electric purple. That's what helped researchers realize they had found a new species of jellyfish. The creature grows to a maximum size of 1 inch across. It has tentacles that stretch out in every direction. Now, if you come close to this jellyfish, it'll pull all these tentacles in toward its body before rapidly swimming away to avoid danger. Yes, you are dangerous. The chrysota jelly is extremely rare. You won't see it very often. You might need to borrow that deep-sea diving robot I mentioned earlier. While worms and jellyfish might seem quite harmless, this isn't the case with the Pacific viperfish. Ooh. This creature is equipped with a noticeably big mouth, like me, and the needle-like teeth inside are key to its hunting strategy. Pacific viperfish live at around 5,000 feet below the ocean surface, but they're among those numerous marine animals that migrate each night from the ocean depths toward shallower waters to dine. What's on the menu for dinner tonight? Lots of small fish and shrimp. The creature can grow up to 12 inches in length. Its 2 front fangs, which stick up from the fish's bottom jaw past its own eyes, are especially dramatic. When the fish unhinges its jaw, its mouth can open wide enough to engulf smaller animals, and the teeth form a cage to prevent an escape. Now, have you ever seen an underwater creature that looks like a strawberry? Trust me, it does exist. Just look at these dots on the strawberry squid. The creature has a big eye and a smaller one. You might think this unconventional pairing would be awkward and uncomfortable, but it's actually the opposite. The big left eye looks upward. It spots shadows cast by other animals in the dimly lit waters above. The eye's tubular shape helps it collect as much light as possible. On the other side of the squid's head, you can see its right eye. It's small and looks downward. This eye searches for flashes of bioluminescence produced by animals lurking in the darker waters below. Now, bioluminescence means the production and emission of light by living organisms. By the way, the squid has a nickname. And no, it's not Squiggy, although that's a great one. It's known as the cockeyed squid. This is simply due to the remarkable difference in size between its two eyes. I think I like Squiggy better, and so it goes. Since light doesn't reach the deep sea, the strawberry squid's body actually looks black. This helps the creature hide from enemies, such as sharks and dolphins. In general, the strawberry squid grows to a length of 5 inches. It typically lives around 3,000 feet below the surface, but floats to shallower waters at night. Now, the feather star is a marine creature without a backbone, but with feather-like arms that radiate from the center of its body. These creatures first appeared around 200 million years ago. Related to sea stars, they look like a flower, but if you approach them, they'll quickly swim away. But not all feather stars can swim. Many species can only crawl along the bottom of the seafloor. Like some of the other deep-sea creatures we've looked at, the feather star can adapt to its surroundings. It has a creepy ability to shed its arms, the same way some lizards can shed their tails. This also helps them escape from their enemies. Feather stars live all across the globe, from the equator to the poles, from the shallow waters on top of reefs to the deep, deep sea. Now, given that we're dealing with mysterious creatures, the name of this one is quite fitting. The swift vampire squid should be the official symbol of life in the deep sea. The animal has a dark red body, huge blue eyes, and a cloak-like web that stretches between its 8 arms. This, along with its name, may suggest that the creature is some form of a terrifying hunter. In reality, though, the vampire squid is a soft-bodied, timid creature, about the size, shape, and color of a football. It grows to roughly 12 inches in length and lives 3,000 feet below the waves. There's almost no oxygen there, but also relatively few predators. Whew, I think I'll need to decompress from this one. London, a bustling city of contrasts that never sleeps. Life is in full swing there, both on the surface, with almost 10 million people dwelling there, and underneath it. Now don't get me wrong, London rent did go crazy over the last few years, but people haven't started living underground, at least not yet. But it's safe to say there are actually 2 Londons. You know, the one with Big Ben, the Tower of London, and Greenwich, and secret tunnels and forgotten spaces that lie deep beneath the bustling streets of the city have something to show you too. It all starts with a white, unassuming door. To find it, you need to head to the eastbound platform of the Chancery Lane station on the London Underground. It doesn't seem to be hiding a big deal of secrets, but those who can open it know that behind it lies a maze of tunnels. Who knows, maybe this is the reason why Chancery Lane was closed a staggering 48 times from January to August 2023. And in 2022, it had 137 closures. That's more than a third of the entire year. They say the closures were due to all sorts of reasons, like staff shortages, naughty trespassers, and weather. But hey, it's a bit suspicious. So, the tunnels. They were built in the 1940s as shelters, later repurposed for cloak and dagger activities, storage of top-secret documents, and even telecom services. Rumor has it that the hotline between the most powerful states ran directly through these tunnels. These are called the Kingsway Exchange Tunnels, and they're located 130 feet below street level in central London, underneath High Holborn. It used to be very secret-y. Ian Fleming, the guy who created James Bond and actually spent some time working at that place, got inspired by it and created the whole Q operations in the James Bond movies. The General Post Office took over in 1949, and by 1956, it turned into the place where the first transatlantic telephone cable terminated. Over the years, it was home to post office engineers and radio interference investigators. The place even had the deepest bar in the UK. It used to serve drinks for the big shots, but it's closed now. The thing is, by the 1990s, it had been mostly abandoned due to asbestos and other safety concerns. But you may get the chance to sip a drink at Britain's deepest licensed bar pretty soon. Here's the deal. In 2023, the London Tunnel swooped in to save the day. They bought the tunnels and have big plans to turn them into an interactive cultural experience for the public. With a projected opening in 2027, this place is set to become a hotspot for history buffs and curious adventurers alike. And let's not forget the cool entrances, from a secret shopfront on High Holborn to a mysterious goods lift on Furnival Street. Sadly, the entrance at Tooks Court is no more, but hey, that just adds to the mystery, right? Now, if you don't feel like waiting for several years to visit the Neither London, there's another way of seeing the other side of the city. Now, there's a small downside to it, as the tour might be a little, stinky. Do you know that beneath the streets of London, there is a maze of 1,200 miles of brick tunnels for raw sewage? That's a whole lot of pipes. And don't forget about the 80 miles of main sewers, big enough to pass for railway tunnels. Back in the day, when London was a hot spot for cholera outbreaks, the city was facing a real crisis. People were falling ill, and no one knew what to do. But the problem was that all the waste that Londoners produced went straight into the Thames, the main source of water in the city. So all the cooking, cleaning, and other activities involving water were done with the Thames' terribly dirty water. Enter Sir Joseph Bazalgette, the man with a plan. This genius engineer designed a new sewage system that saved the day. No more sewage turning the Thames into a cesspool. Bazalgette's pumping stations were like something out of a steampunk novel, massive and magnificent. Fast forward to today, and London's old sewer system is feeling the strain. With the number of people living in the city getting close to 10 million, it's time for an upgrade. That's where the Thames Tideway Tunnel comes in, a super sewer to the rescue. It'll be like a giant underground highway for waste, the construction of which was completed in March of the 2024 year. And while you can't really travel in the Victorian sewage, there is an underground world you can visit in London, but it's not for free. It won't cost you much, just as much as one metro ride. The London Underground is the pioneer of underground railways. Imagine, it's the 19th century and they're building the Metropolitan Railway, the very first underground railway in the world. Sure thing, it used to look very different from those cozy carriages they have in London now. It all started way back in 1863 with wooden carriages and steam locomotives. In the 1900s, things really started heating up underground. The City and South London Railway kicked things off with electric trains, followed by the Waterloo and City Railway, Central London Railway, and Great Northern and City Railway. It was electrification mania down there. The Underground Electric Railways Company of London came onto the scene, bringing to life a bunch of tube lines, for example, the Bakerloo, Piccadilly, and Hampstead lines. Now, the London Underground is affectionately called the Tube because of its tube-shaped tunnels. It's not the only underground-related nickname the Londoners have. When the Central Line Railway was introduced in 1900, it was playfully dubbed the Twopenny Tube because tickets only cost 2 pennies. And that fun nickname has been with us ever since, adding a little extra charm to our daily commute. More than 1 billion journeys are taken on the London Underground every year. That's over 5 million journeys each day. Surprisingly, the biggest part of the Underground isn't actually underground. Out of the 270 stations, only 45% are below the surface. Oopsies, turns out it's not that Neither London I was talking about. Whatever. Do you know that the iconic tube map was inspired by a circuit board? Harry Beck, the designer, broke the map mold and created a cool and colorful diagram that still helps us navigate the underground today. The tube is quite royal as well. Queen Elizabeth II was the first royal to ride the tube in 1969 when she opened the Victoria Line, and she hopped on a few times since then. Every single day, people forget something on the tube. Some weird stuff has been left there over the years: a judge's wig, a prosthetic leg, even an urn of ashes. Oops, did somebody forget Grandpa? Another fun fact is that penalty fares weren't a thing until 1994. Fare dodging used to be a common practice before that, but now those caught are fined £10 on the spot. Also, there's a fake house on the underground track. It's hiding part of the track that was demolished back in 1868 when the district line opened. The neighbors weren't too happy about the gap, so they built a facade to match the rest of the houses on the street. And get this, the shortest distance between two adjacent stations is only 850 feet. It's between the Covent Garden and Leicester Square on the Piccadilly line, and it's a super quick journey that's still popular with visitors. The first escalator was introduced at Earl's Court in 1911. People were so scared of it that they didn't trust its safety. Legend has it that a man named William Bumper Harris, with a wooden leg, rode the escalator all day to prove it was safe. Pretty wild, huh?
You've heard of Dune, right? Giant sandworms, Zendaya and Timothée walking the desert in funky spacesuits fighting over spice. Well, welcome to Mount Baldy, our very own real-life version of Dune, minus the celebrities and giant worms. Instead of space drama, we're dealing with something even weirder. A dune that's literally eating people. Mount Baldy rises over Lake Michigan like a giant sandy mountain, looking totally normal. But under all that sand, there's a mystery that's got scientists scratching their heads. It all started on a sunny afternoon back in 2013, when a 6-year-old boy named Nathan was running up the dune. The boy was on vacation with his family and his best friend. They were excited to spend their days swimming in the lake's cold water and soaking in the warm sun. At some point, Nathan and his best friend got tired of swimming and decided to explore the dunes. Their idea of fun was to run up the slopes and then slide it all the way back down. When they were running uphill, Nathan took the lead and saw something weird. A hole. He leaned forward to check it out when the ground literally swallowed him whole. It happened too fast. Nathan was gone before his friend got there. His family freaked out, and for 3 long hours, search teams desperately tried to find him. Don't worry, the guy survived, even though his chances were slim. And since then, scientists have been trying to understand what on earth caused this accident. The weird part here is that dunes like Mount Baldy shouldn't have holes or empty spaces underneath them. Dunes are supposed to be solid piles of sand. For sinkholes to happen, there needs to be running water below ground. This water usually weakens the soil up until the point where the ground breaks beneath the surface and a huge hole opens up. That afternoon that Nathan disappeared, a geologist happened to be passing by and was completely shook by what had happened. Erin Argillen, who tried helping with the rescue, said she never heard of anything like that in her years of studying dunes. She was determined to figure it out though, so she went back to Mount Baldy and used ground-penetrating radar to scan the dune. That's when she saw the problem was way bigger than expected. Bizarrely enough, there were another 66 hidden holes just waiting to collapse. It was like Mount Baldy was a dune full of invisible traps, and no one had any clue why. Argillen started to speculate what could possibly explain this phenomenon. One clue rests on the history of Mount Baldy. You see, over the years, sand was taken from Mount Baldy for industrial purposes, like making mason jars and other glass products. Some scientists think that removing all that sand disturbed the natural structure of the dune. This disruption could have caused the dune to weaken, making it unstable and creating the weird hollow pockets we're seeing now. But this theory doesn't explain why the sinkholes are only happening now or why they disappear so quickly. These sinkholes sort of look like those old Hollywood movies quicksand. They open up, sometimes swallow something or someone, then they disappear. But real quicksand is not as evil as the ones in the movies. It's a slushy mix of sand and water that looks solid from above, but it collapses into a more liquid form if a heavy object disturbs it. Another theory says it's probably because of fallen trees, buried long ago under layers of sand. These trees could be decaying and leaving behind empty spaces. If the sand shifts just right, it could cause these gaps to collapse, forming sinkholes. The problem with this theory goes back to the disappearing sinkholes. If it were true, the holes would remain open. This next deep hole seems to come out of a totally different Hollywood era. Something like if Jurassic Park met Aquaman. Behold, the famous Sawmill Sink. This wonder of nature is a deep, mysterious blue hole in the Bahamas. Think of it as a giant underwater sinkhole that goes down about 120 feet, filled with fresh and salty water. It's a natural wonder by itself, but also because scientists started to uncover perfectly preserved fossils and ancient bones in it. We're talking extinct species like giant tortoises, crocodiles, and even an ancient rat the size of your backpack. Back in 2004, scientists hit the jackpot when they dove down into the depths of Sawmill Sink and pulled up fossils that have been there for thousands of years. You may think they did not preserve well, but no. The water there is so cold and low on oxygen that everything stayed in tip-top shape, like it had been frozen. The scientists didn't just find long-lost animals, but human remains too. These bones composed a human tibia and sacrum of a Lucayan person, the indigenous folks who lived in the Bahamas about 1,000 years ago. This discovery shocked archaeologists because it gave them a major clue into the lives of the Bahamas' original inhabitants. And speaking of holes, this group of scientists tried digging an insanely deep one just to hear Mother Earth's heartbeat. Hang in there, I'll explain. It started back in 1987, when the Germans decided to dig the KTB borehole in Bavaria. A borehole is a deep hole in the ground used to find oil. These guys managed to dig almost 30,000 feet below the ground. Their mission was to understand more about our planet's inner workings, like tectonic movements, temperature changes, and seismic activity. But as they dug deeper, they were hit with a few surprises. Instead of finding solid, stable rock, they encountered fluids and gas seeping into the hole, which threw off everything they thought they knew. The heat also spiked way faster than expected, making scientists rethink their theories on how temperature behaves deep down. They actually had to stop digging because they reached the insane temperature of 572 Fahrenheit. This whole experiment sparked the interest of a Dutch artist who decided to tag along and do an experiment of her own. She used a geophone, which is an instrument that converts ground movements to voltage, and she recorded sound waves from the hole. When she got the results, she was shocked to hear that the sounds they recorded resembled a distant thunder and almost sounded like a real heartbeat. Okay, so this diamond mine could easily be scouted as a location for some Star Wars sequel, and I'm not even joking. Located way up in the remote wilderness of northern Canada, surrounded by ice, snow, and a lake, sits the Diavik Diamond Mine. Since opening in 2003, Diavik has produced over 100 million carats of high-quality diamonds. But what really makes Diavik special is how it's powered, in part by a wind farm. Yep, they managed to do that even in the cold tundra. When Diavik first opened, it was all about open-pit mining. But now they've moved underground, digging deeper to find those hidden treasures. And to make it all work, they had to build a dike system to stop the lake from flooding the mine. Pretty intense, right? And then there's the Monticello Dam, which sounds pretty Italian, but it's actually located in Napa Valley, California. This beauty was built between 1953 and 1957, and it created Lake Berryessa, which holds the record for the 7th largest man-made lake in California. The lake covers approximately 20,000 acres, which is about as big as Disney World in Florida. And although this lake works as a water reservoir for the northern region of the San Francisco Bay Area, that's not its most important feature. Its most unique feature is known as the Glory Hole. The Glory Hole is a morning glory type spillway which helps to drain the excess water from the dam. It has a diameter of 72 feet at the top, and it can drain an astonishing 48,000 cubic feet of water per second, when the lake reaches its maximum capacity. If you thought about swimming around in the lake, forget it. It's pretty fascinating, but it was forbidden since someone swam too close to it in '97 and was swept inside the spillway. Yikes.
On April 15, 2019, an unexpected fire almost destroyed one of the most famous buildings in the world, the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris.
Most famous buildings in the world. Fire that nearly destroyed it.
The blaze that has been ravaging the cathedral.
It spread quickly, burning through the tall spire and most of the roof. The fire began in the evening and was raging until the next morning. The flames destroyed much of the roof, but firefighters managed to save the main part of the cathedral and priceless pieces of art that were inside. But it was a narrow escape. Who could have known that it was a blessing in disguise, sort of? After the fire, a team of about 50 archaeologists started working at the ruins. They found some artifacts dating back over 2,000 years. One of the most interesting finds was 2 lead coffins, or sarcophagi. Scientists who studied it had to wear special clothes to protect them from lead when they were opening the finds. They found the bones of 2 wealthy men inside, but despite their riches, it looked like they had had tough lives. One of the men was easy to identify because there was an epitaph on the coffin. Only wealthy people could afford lead coffins in the 18th century because they helped to keep the body in good condition. But the coffin was broken, and there were only some bones, some hair, and bits of clothing left inside. The scientists could tell from the bones that the man didn't move around much and had a health condition called gout. It affects joints, especially the knees, so he was sure to have a hard time walking. Money couldn't help him get rid of that, but he used it wisely though. Antoine helped to pay for the cathedral's choir and ordered some paintings that are now in the Louvre Museum. The person in the second sarcophagus remained a mystery for a long time, but scientists say they might know who he was. When they first looked at the bones, they found that they belonged to a man who was between 25 and 40 years old. They also saw that he probably rode horses from an early age. This man's bones showed signs that he had long-lasting health problems, and most of his teeth were missing before he died. His skull was shaped differently, possibly because he wore a special headband as a kid. The researchers think that this man might be the French poet Joachim du Bellay, who lived between 1522 and 1560. He was a skilled horse rider and had lung problems. It's strange that, although he wasn't a church leader, he was buried in a cathedral and not in a side chapel near his uncle like his family wanted. Scientists think that either he was buried in a temporary spot that later became permanent, or his coffin was moved after all his works had been published. Only a DNA test could establish if it was really Joachim du Bellay, so the mystery lives on for now. The fire did help to solve another Notre Dame mystery: how the thin walls support the vaulted ceiling at such a great height. When it was finished, the cathedral was the tallest building since the Great Pyramid, with a height of the vaults of 105 feet. That's about the height of a 10-story building. The fire of 2019 revealed a secret hiding inside the walls: thousands of iron staples. Each of them is about 8 to 20 inches long, like the length of a ruler or a little longer, and they weigh 3 to 9 pounds. Before using iron, builders would put wooden rods between the walls to help keep everything steady, but wood is not as strong as iron and can break more easily. Iron is also easier to hide inside the walls, so it made the cathedral look like it was held up by magic. This idea of an iron skeleton was so good that other churches started using it too. By the way, we could have lost Notre Dame completely in the 19th century. The Parisians were tired of the Gothic style and signed a petition for Notre Dame's demolition. And that's when famous writer Victor Hugo, who loved architecture, saved the cathedral with The Hunchback of Notre Dame. The novel became a hit, and people learned to appreciate the beautiful medieval construction all over again, and it was refurbished. A team of craftspeople fixed the existing features and added new elements, including a spire weighing 750 tons, copper statues, and the 56 Chimera. The gargoyles that became the symbols of Notre Dame weren't there from the start either. It took almost 200 years to finish the cathedral, and during that time Gothic style came into fashion. So, by the time it was finished, Notre Dame had dozens of those mythical creatures made of limestone. They had a very practical function: to channel water away from the walls and foundations and save the building from erosion. In 1926, a book called The Mystery of the Cathedrals was published in Paris. It said that the secrets of alchemy were hidden right on the walls of Notre Dame. Yes, that ancient form of magic that was mentioned in Harry Potter. Alchemy isn't a real science, but art experts now mostly agree that Notre Dame is an alchemical text in stone. On the roof of one of Notre Dame's towers, called the North Tower, there is a picture carved in stone, not of any saint, but of an alchemist. He's wearing a special Phrygian hat. It shows that the person is part of Hermeticism, a group that studied secret knowledge. At the main entrance of the cathedral, there's a big door called the Portal of the Last Judgment. The author of the book said that this door has clues about the Philosopher's Stone, which alchemists believe could turn regular metals into gold and give people eternal life. On the central part of this door, there is a carving of a woman holding a ladder with 9 steps. This is called the Ladder of the Philosopher. It's meant to show the 9 steps or stages that an alchemist must go through to complete their work. All around the cathedral, there are more stone bas-reliefs. One of them shows a man holding a shield with a symbol called a caduceus. It's a symbol of the deity Hermes, and it also represents Mercury, a crucial element in alchemy. In the story of Hermes, this staff had the power to bring people back to life. There are also 12 scriptures of the apostles decorating the arches on the sides of the door. One of these apostles is pointing up at an angel, and the angel is pointing toward the left bank of the Seine River. Some people think that this might be a clue about where the Philosopher's Stone is hidden. An eagle carved on the same portal is also pointing in the same direction as the angel. The eagle also represents the power to change regular metal into gold. The main doors of Notre Dame are covered in iron designs that look complicated to make even now. So they seemed almost impossible in the Middle Ages, when there were no fancy machines we have now. According to a legend, the ironwork was made by a young metalworker named Biscornet. It took him months of demanding work, but finally, the iron designs were finished and put onto the doors of the cathedral. When the people saw it, they could hardly believe that a human could create something so beautiful. They said he must have made a deal with evil forces, and the swirling designs looked like the number 666. The fact that his name means two-horned only made things worse. Not long after the doors were installed, Biscornet passed away from all the stress and hard work. But for many people in Paris, it was only proof of the rumors. They believed that something really dark and otherworldly had come to take the man's soul as part of the deal he made to create the doors. Ooh.
It was 1905. A 13-year-old boy named Ben Sands grabs his lantern and slips into the Craighead Caverns in Sweetwater, Tennessee, a place he already knew like the back of his hand. But that day felt different. He was in the mood for a little more adventure, so he left the main trail behind and went deeper into the shadows. That's when our brave teen decided to squeeze into a narrow, muddy tunnel, barely as wide as a bicycle tire. He crawled for what felt like forever. Then, after about 40 feet, he finally popped out the other side and couldn't believe what was happening. He had water up to his knees. Yep, he was standing in the middle of a massive underground lake. The chamber was so huge, the light from his lantern barely reached the walls. Then, he had a great idea. He started tossing mud balls into the darkness as far as he could, just to test the ground ahead. All he heard in return was splash, splash, splash. It was all water. What Ben had discovered would later be named the Lost Sea, which is considered America's largest underground lake. It's also the second largest non-glacial subterranean lake in the world. The only one bigger is Dragon's Breath Cave, hidden on private land in Namibia. The underground lake in Craighead Caverns is so massive and mysterious, we haven't fully explored it. Thanks to top-notch equipment, divers have discovered more than 13 acres of water-filled rooms beneath the surface. But the visible part of the Lost Sea stretches only about 4 acres. One time, a brave diver entered one of the submerged chambers with a sonar device in hand. This kind of equipment works by sending out sound pulses underwater. When those sound waves hit something, they bounce back. Then, the device measures how long it takes for the echo to return and calculates how far away the object is. So, he was confident he could map the whole thing using sonar. But he also played it safe. He hugged the wall the entire time, the only way to make sure he'd find his way back. As he took surroundings in every direction, the results came back the same. Nothing but more water. To this day, no one has found the end of the lake, but they're not done yet. Each expedition reveals new chambers, new tunnels, and new mysteries. The funny part is, Craighead Caverns was already a well-known spot long before Ben stumbled across the Long Sea. And over the years, this cave has had some pretty unusual and kinda eccentric uses. The first people we know who used the cave were the Cherokee. The upper chamber served as a meeting place for their councils, and we know that because a wide range of Native American artifacts, including pottery, arrowheads, and jewelry, have been found in one of the rooms. Then, between 1939 and 1940, the cavern was turned into a mushroom farm. A few years later, in 1947, someone decided to build a wooden floor right inside the cave. That's when the underground nightclub known as the Cavern Tavern was born. And here's another fun fact. One of the cave's earliest visitors wasn't a person at all. It was a giant jaguar. It made its way deep into the cave about 20,000 years ago and apparently got lost in the darkness. It wandered for days before falling into a crevice far from any light. Some of its bones were found in 1939, and today they're on display at the American Museum of Natural History in New York. But I suppose nothing that's ever happened in the cave quite compares to what lies deeper inside. If you're feeling brave enough to explore its depths, you can actually take a boat tour across its underwater lake. That's right, there are excursion boats inside the cave, all powered by electric motors. It is probably a dark, cold, and strangely peaceful journey. And just below the boat, you will see some big rainbow trout swimming around. They weren't always there. People actually brought them in and released them into the underground lake. And according to visitors, the guides explained that it was all part of a bigger plan. They wanted to see if the fish would find an exit and reveal a hidden tunnel to another body of water. But the fish stayed put. So now, visitors have something else to look at during the ride. And since there's no natural food in the cave, the trout have to be fed by hand every single day. Guides also mentioned that one of the most fascinating features of the caverns isn't the lake or the trout. It's a crystalline structure known as anthodites, also called cave flowers. These are fragile, spiky clusters, and they are rare. Really rare. Now, here is a question. If Ben Sands discovered a lost sea out of nowhere, does that mean we could still find something similar? Well, yes. There are probably still many underground bodies of water hidden around the world. In 2016, for example, a massive reservoir of water was discovered deep beneath the Uturuncu volcano located in the Andes. But it's not like a calm, friendly lake. The water is dissolved into partially molten rock, so it's stunningly hot. We're talking about a temperature close to 1,830 degrees Fahrenheit. Then, in 2021, scientists found a huge thermal lake inside a cave in southern Albania. And in 2024, they returned to the same spot with more advanced measurement equipment. They found that the lake measures 454 feet long and 138 feet wide. That pretty much confirmed it is the biggest hidden lake of its kind we know about. Also, in 2024, a group of workers from a travel agency was exploring Tung Cave in Vietnam when they suddenly came across a mysterious lake, hidden way down in a part of the cave that hardly anyone ever sees. Its water reflects a transparent emerald or greenish color, making it look unbelievably beautiful. This spot will probably be open to tourism very soon. Alright, finding hidden lakes inside caves or beneath volcanoes is one thing, but finding a hidden ocean inside the Earth, that is a whole different story. And believe it or not, it actually happened not long ago. But you can't swim in its waters, for two big reasons. First, it's hidden about 400 miles underground. And second, the water isn't in liquid form like a normal sea. Instead, it's trapped inside solid rocks. Sounds strange, but let me explain. Back in 2014, researchers found deep pockets of magma located around 400 miles beneath North America. And that's a pretty strong sign there's water down there. But how? Down there, scientists discovered a mineral called ringwoodite, which only forms under extremely high pressure, the kind you would find deep within the Earth's mantle. And inside the structure of ringwoodite, they found water, not in puddles or pools, but trapped inside the mineral itself. Ringwoodite acts like a sponge, holding water within its crystal structure. And when scientists ran the numbers, they realized something staggering. The amount of water trapped in this mineral could be 3 times greater than all the oceans on Earth combined. And that is huge. Not just in size, but the actual discovery is huge, because it might confirm a theory that's been around for decades. That a massive reservoir of water exists deep beneath Earth's crust. Geologists believe this deep reservoir plays a key role in Earth's water cycle. It might be responsible for volcanic activity, the movement of tectonic plates, and even how water first appeared on the planet's surface. Instead of arriving on comets or asteroids, Earth's water might have always been here, slowly seeping out over billions of years from deep underground. Do you know how much gold has been mined by humans throughout history? About 216,000 tons, and 2/3 of this amount was mined after the 1950s. Different countries, different times, thousands of different people involved. But what if you found huge deposits of gold in one place? What if a giant gold ore deposit was discovered? No, not just giant, but super giant. This is exactly what was found in China. A group of geologists discovered about 40 gold veins with about 330 tons of gold ore. But that's not all. 3D modeling has shown that even more gold lies underneath. At a depth of about 9,800 feet, there may be several hundred more tons. In short, there is a chance that they will discover deposits with about 1,100 tons of gold. Can you imagine how much that is? If not, that's about $83 billion. Wow! Experts say that this deposit contains approximately 4.9 ounces per ton of ore. It seems that this is negligible, but in fact, it's a high indicator in gold mining. Usually, 0.35 ounces per ton is awesome. If all calculations turn out to be correct, it will be the largest gold mine in the world, even bigger than the South Deep mine located in South Africa, with its 1,025 tons of gold. Everyone is worried. Everyone is happy. Gold, gold, gold on their minds. Everyone wants gold. Everyone buys gold. Gold is rising in price. Gold is more reliable than Bitcoin and cash. Gold is associated with wealth and luxury. Gold is always a valuable and profitable investment. But hold up. Why is it so? Why do people go crazy over some shiny metal? The fact is that gold has both practical and psychological value. For centuries, gold has represented power, prestige, and wealth in different cultures. It seems we're born in a genetic memory that gold is valuable. Think of how many problems gold has brought to literary heroes and how many gold-related adventures we've seen in movies. Gold makes people happy and greedy, cruel and intimidated. That's why so many people love it. Yes, it glitters, it's beautiful, but it's also practical. Gold doesn't rust, it doesn't corrode, it can be stored for a long time, and it doesn't deteriorate. It's literally a reliable investment. All other savings may lose value because of crises, but gold remains unchanged. The only problem, it can get stolen. In addition to jewelry making, gold is used in electronics, medicine, aerospace, and many other industries. Bitcoin has a value because of the public support of people around the world. Money has value thanks to the support of authorities. Gold has value on its own. It's tangible and visually appealing, and its worth is also supported by people's centuries-old belief in its enduring value. But never let gold cloud your mind. Many people lose their honor and even their minds over it. Avoid this trap. It's just a shiny piece of metal. There are other precious metals in the periodic table: palladium, silver, copper, platinum. Why is gold number 1? Cheaper metals such as copper, iron, lead, and aluminum corrode and rust. Aluminum is also not durable. Platinum and palladium are more expensive than gold, but they're too rare and difficult to mine. You won't make many coins out of them. Silver is softer than gold. It tarnishes, scratches, and deforms. And, well, to be honest, gold is more beautiful. But there is another reason why gold is so expensive. It's quite difficult to get. Gold mining is a very laborious and long process. In movies or documentaries, you might have seen people standing at the mouth of a river, collecting silt and clay, sifting it through gauze and small nets, and finding gold particles there. That's one of the methods for how gold is mined. You have to work hard to get just a few small pieces. How do they find gold? It used to be luck. Someone was walking along the shore and saw something glistening in the water. But today, gold detection methods are much more effective. Geologists know that gold is present in almost all rocks and soil, but its particles are so tiny that they're not visible. But when the concentration of gold is high and noticeable, work begins to extract it. Special geological teams are engaged in searching for these sites. When they discover gold, they drill wells, then take soil samples and decide if there's enough metal to carry out large-scale mining. Production depends on the deposit. If gold is in hard rock, miners drill holes, place dynamite, and detonate it. The explosion breaks the rock into pieces so they can extract the gold. But this is just the beginning of the work. After collecting large pieces of rock, workers take them to factories to extract valuable material. At the first stage, specialists break large pieces of rock into smaller ones. Using crushing machines, they grind the ore into tiny pieces, similar to gravel. This gravel then enters rotating drums filled with steel balls. The drums spin, and the balls grind the gravel into powder under pressure. This mass is then mixed with water and passes through special filters. After that, gold is extracted from the ore using chemical solvents and complex purification systems. It adheres to carbon, then is separated from it, followed by several additional processes, including electrolysis and further purification. At the end, the gold is melted and separated from impurities, then poured into ingots and sent to other plants for further processing. Yes, it's a difficult and time-consuming process, and quite a long one. And it's not always profitable. You can find a deposit of precious metal, but it will be too expensive to extract it, and the amount of gold there won't be enough to make the effort worthwhile. Only 10% of the world's gold deposits contain enough precious material to pay back for its extraction and processing. There are many areas filled with gold. Do you know how many of them are suitable for productive mining? Less than 0.1%. So this is probably another reason why gold is so valuable. But is there any other material that causes a lot of excitement? Oh yes, This material is called liquid gold, and this is helium. That's the gas used to inflate balloons. But this is not its main value. Helium is capable of reaching ultra-low temperatures, is superconducting, and is lightweight. Helium is used in medicine for diagnostics. For example, for magnetic resonance imaging. Helium cools nuclear reactors and maintains rocket fuel temperatures during launch. Divers breathe a mixture of helium and oxygen during deep dives to avoid diseases associated with pressure changes. Helium is crucial for the modern world. Another precious material is graphene. It's not just one of the most durable materials in the world, it's a highly conductive material. Heat and electricity pass through graphene easily, which makes it very promising for the development of what? Considering that graphene is also flexible, water-repellent, non-toxic, and has antibacterial properties, it's suitable for developing everything. Medical equipment, mechanical engineering, electronics, construction, logistics, energy conservation, space and underwater industries, and much more. Scientists believe that graphene has the potential to enable revolutionary new technologies that could change the lives of all people. Something similar happened with silicon, which is actively used to create semiconductors and rechargeable batteries. It's possible that without silicon, we wouldn't have smartphones, laptops, and other electronic devices. Graphene may also lead to a new technological leap. When the world switches to renewable sources of energy and uses electric transport, graphene can become technological gold. During tests, graphene batteries have shown that they charge more than 70 times faster than regular ones and last 3 times longer. At the same time, they're cheaper and environmentally friendly. Okay, that sounds cool, but where do we get this graphene? It's obtained from graphite, which lies in the bowels of the Earth. One of the largest graphite deposits is located in South Australia. 200 million tons of high-quality graphite. It sounds like it could be enough for the entire planet. This coffin seems to defy logic. No visible openings, no way in or out, and yet, inside lies Lady Jeanette Ah, a mysterious woman from ancient Egypt, perfectly preserved even after 3,000 years. How did she get there? It was the third intermediate period in Egypt, a time between great dynasties. Pharaohs wore the blue crowns. Priests in Thebes were almost as powerful as kings. Markets were filled with the cries of merchants selling dates, papyrus, and precious perfumes. Lady Jeanette Ah was in her late 30s or early 40s, old age by Egyptian standards of that time. Like other Egyptians at the time, she ate meals of bread, lentils, and fish. By that age, her teeth were already badly worn down, yellowish with enamel eroded, because food in ancient Egypt often had grains of sand in it. But she wasn't just a regular woman. When she passed away for unknown reasons, her burial was lavish. Locals wrapped her body in expensive linen and adorned with artificial eyes to replace her real ones. That would help her see in the afterlife. And that's exactly how we found her 3,000 years later, in a beautifully decorated sarcophagus. It was made of cartonnage, which is kind of like papier-mâché, made by layering linen and papyrus with adhesive. These coffins were wildly strong, lasting for thousands of years, all thanks to Egypt's super dry climate. But most importantly, Egyptians only used it for the elite. So she was someone very important to the locals, though we might never know why. But there was only one huge problem with her mummy. How did they even put her in the coffin? No matter how much researchers looked, there were simply no entry points. The only visible gap was a tiny slit near her feet. But that's not nearly large enough to place her entire body inside. This mystery puzzled them for decades, until they finally learned the truth only recently. They study those mummies at the Field Museum in Chicago using new technology, CT scans. It's basically like taking thousands of X-rays and piecing them together to create detailed 3D images. That's how we can learn more about the bodies without disturbing them. And it turns out the ancient Egyptians were unbelievably clever. they didn't construct the cartonnage around Shenat A's body, which would be a common and easy thing to do. Instead, embalmers created the coffin first. Then, they softened this coffin with moisture to make it flexible. After that, they carefully molded it around her wrapped body. They did cut a slit along the back of the coffin to do that, but then they laced it up like a corset, so it seemed like there were no openings. Finally, they secured a wooden panel at her feet to keep everything in place. That's where the tiny slit came from. Usually, the insides were removed and put in jars, symbolically guarded by the 4 sons of Horus. Egyptians believed that the deceased would need all that stuff once they got into the afterlife. They also thought it would help preserve the body for ages, which, as we can see, worked amazingly well. Thanks to their beliefs, we now have mummies as time capsules. Each son of Horus was supposed to protect each of the specific body parts. The human-headed Imseti for the liver, the baboon-headed Hapi for the lungs, the jackal-headed Dalmutef for the stomach, and the falcon-headed Kebis Senuv for the intestines. It's crazy how much effort the embalmers put into their job, especially in Lady Shenat A. They wanted to make sure her body remains untouched and the sarcophagus would be perfect for her. You can't help but wonder, who was she if she mattered so much? The ancient Egyptians literally viewed the afterlife as modern retirement planning. You're not just passing away, you gotta prepare yourself for it. Prepare the body, eyes to see, and so on. And the richer or more important you were, the better your afterlife would be. But Shenat A wasn't the only fascinating mummy they studied. They also decided to scan Harwa, an Egyptian man who lived around the same time. Judging by the mummy, he also had a high social status. His mummy revealed no signs of hard labor and his teeth were well kept, which means he enjoyed some high-quality food without tons of sand in it. Some fellas got lucky both in life and after it. But there were many mysterious mummies throughout history. One of them is Chin Tsun, also known as Lady Dai. The story of her began in 1968. Some workers near Changsha, China were digging an air raid shelter for a hospital. But suddenly, they accidentally uncovered an ancient burial site. They came down there and stumbled upon something incredible. 3 tombs belonging to a noblewoman, her husband, and a young man believed to be their son. She was a noblewoman from ancient China, and she had a fascinating backstory. She lived over 2,000 years ago during the Western Han Dynasty. She was married to Li Kang, a guy who served as chancellor to the Changsha Kingdom, a high-ranking official. At first, it looks like Lady Dai lived a life of luxury and privilege. She had private musicians to play at her parties, and for her personal enjoyment. She probably played the guqin, an instrument that back in the day people associated with intellect and elegance. And she certainly ate like an empress. Fine meats, delicacies, and all things like that. Even her wardrobe was full of some exquisite silk, not even mentioning the tons of cosmetics. But all this wealth came at a cost. The more she aged, the worse her health became. She got a full pack: a heart condition, diabetes, high pressure, and liver issues. It also looks like her back was driving her crazy, probably making it hard for her to even move. Finally, as a cherry on top, she developed gallstones. All this packed together eventually led to a heart attack that took her life around the age of 50. There was one haunting detail. Scientists found over 130 melon seeds in her stomach and intestines. Most likely, she ate watermelon just hours before she passed away, which means it was probably during summer when the fruit was ripe. She enjoyed a sweet, simple treat before her life was cut short. The excavation began in 1972, and this wasn't easy at all. Over 1,500 local students had to help. And Lady Dai was the most mysterious one. She was buried in 4 rectangular pine boxes, one inside the other like a Matryoshka doll, all wrapped in 20 layers of silk, and all that sealed with lots of charcoal and white clay. The coffins were painted beautifully as well, adorned with protective deities, mythical animals, and clouds which symbolized the heavens. There were drawings of divine creatures and Mount Kunlun. The myth said that on this mountain, people reach eternal happiness. All this told us a lot about the Han Dynasty, their beliefs about afterlife, art, daily lives, and their remarkable craftsmanship. And then researchers finally got to the body. It was astonishing. Soft skin, joints that could still bend, and in general, she was almost intact. She even kept her hair, eyelashes, fingerprints, and even traces of blood. It's like she literally passed away only a few weeks ago. Ancient people used a very clever technique to preserve her. It looks like embalmers put her into some weird, mysterious acidic liquid. This liquid prevented bacteria from growing. Unfortunately, it also gave rashes to all the scientists that touched Lady Di. And this rash lasted for 3 months. And you know what they buried together with her? Over 1,400 artifacts, mostly personal stuff like silk clothes, cosmetics, and musical instruments. Even food, grains, meats, wine, and pastries. There were also 162 carved wooden figurines of various servants and musicians. It's possible that they were either just there to service her even in the afterlife, or maybe based on her actual servants.